Gate 47, Dallas, Fort Worth Airport. A pediatric nurse boards the plane carrying stuffed animals. Two pilots at the cockpit door laugh and mock her. Look at the nurse with her teddy bears. Bet she faints at turbulence. Civilians who think flying is scary. 2 hours later, both engines explode. Aircraft falling from 33,000 feet. No restart possible. 178 passengers screaming. Pilots panicking. The nurse stands up. Walks to cockpit. Says, "I'm a pilot. Call sign Nightingale." Air traffic control gasps. Nightingale, the Nightingale. The medevac legend who disappeared. Nobody knew the nurse they mocked was the pilot who would save them all. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. Jessica Warner stood at Gate 47 in Dallas, Fort Worth Airport, exhausted beyond words. Her pink scrubs were covered in cartoon unicorns and rainbows. Her messy ponytail was falling apart. Her backpack was stuffed with teddy bears, coloring books, and small toys. She had just finished a brutal 16-hour shift at Dallas Children's Hospital, and all she wanted was to sleep on this flight to Seattle. She was 29 years old, petite at just 5 feet 3 inches, with tired eyes that had seen too much suffering for someone so young. The shift had been particularly brutal. 3 children in critical condition. One had coded twice. Jessica had been there for both resuscitations, her hands steady on the crash cart, her voice calm as she called out orders. The child had survived, barely. Jessica's scrubs still had small bloodstains she hadn't noticed until now. As she approached the gate, she saw 2 pilots standing at the cockpit door. They were greeting passengers as they boarded Southwest Flight 2847 to Seattle. Captain Mike Preston was 48 years old with 22 years of commercial flying experience. He was ex-Navy, and he never let anyone forget it. He stood tall and confident, his uniform perfectly pressed, his attitude unmistakably arrogant. His name tag gleamed. His shoes were polished to a mirror shine. Everything about him screamed, "I'm better than you." First Officer Jake Chen was 32, with 6 years of commercial flying under his belt. He was younger, less experienced, and he usually just followed Preston's lead in everything. Chen was good at his job, but he had learned to stay quiet around Preston. The captain didn't like being challenged. As Jessica walked toward the gate, dragging her tired feet, Preston elbowed Chen in the ribs. "Check out Nurse Nightingale with the Teddy Bear Brigade," Preston said with a smirk, his voice dripping with condescension. Chen snickered, glancing at Jessica's stuffed animal-filled backpack. $10 says she asks for ginger ale when we hit turbulence. Preston spoke louder, clearly wanting Jessica to hear him. "Civilians who think flying is scary crack me up. Try landing on a carrier deck, sweetie, then talk to me about scary." He turned to Chen and added, "These people have no idea what real flying is. They see a little bump and they panic." Jessica's face flushed red with embarrassment. Every word hit her like a punch. She could feel other passengers staring at her. Some looked sympathetic. Others looked away, embarrassed for her. She could say something. She could tell them exactly who she was and what she'd done. She could wipe that smirk off Preston's face in 2 sentences. But what was the point? She was tired. She was emotionally drained. She didn't have the energy for confrontation. Not worth it, she thought to herself. She walked past them silently, her head down, making her way to seat 18C in economy. Behind her, she could hear Preston's stage whisper, intentionally loud enough for her to hear. "Did you see her face? Probably offended we called flying scary." Both pilots laughed as Jessica found her seat and sat down. A few passengers nearby gave her sympathetic looks. They had heard the pilot's rudeness too. An older woman across the aisle leaned over and whispered, "Don't mind them, honey. Some people just have to put others down to feel important." Jessica gave her a weak smile and nodded. She buckled her seatbelt and closed her eyes. She tried to forget their mockery. She tried to forget a lot of things. But in the quiet darkness behind her eyelids, she heard Sarah's voice from years ago, "Jess, don't let anyone make you feel small. You're Nightingale. You're a legend." Jessica's jaw tightened. She took a deep breath and let it go. Not worth it. Not today. What Captain Preston and First Officer Chin didn't know was who Jessica Warner really was. 8 years ago, Jessica Warner had joined the Air National Guard. She became a C-130 Hercules pilot, one of the youngest female pilots in her unit. She was good. Very good. The training had been brutal. Out of 45 candidates in her class, only 12 graduated. Jessica was the only woman. She faced doubts from instructors, skepticism from fellow trainees, and constant pressure to prove herself. But she never complained. She just flew better than everyone else. During her first deployment to Afghanistan, Jessica flew medevac missions. Medical evacuation. She transported wounded soldiers from the battlefield to field hospitals where they could get life-saving treatment. Her first mission was terrifying. A Marine had been hit by an IED. He was bleeding badly, barely conscious. The landing zone was under sporadic fire. Jessica's hands had trembled on the controls as she brought the massive C-130 down onto a damaged airstrip. But once she started flying, something changed. Her hands became steady. Her mind became clear. She flew that C-130 like it was an extension of her own body. The medical team in the back of the aircraft noticed something unusual. Despite the rough conditions, despite the damaged runway, despite the urgency, Jessica's landing was incredibly smooth. The wounded Marine didn't feel a single bump. On her very first medevac mission, a grizzled old flight engineer nicknamed her Nightingale. "Why Nightingale?" she had asked after they landed safely. "Because you fly like you're carrying glass, not cargo," he said. "Smoothest flying I've ever felt. These wounded boys need that. You got a gift, kid." The name stuck. From that day forward, she was Nightingale. Over the next 8 years, Jessica flew 47 emergency medevac missions. Many of them were in combat conditions. She landed on damaged airstrips under fire. She flew through sandstorms and at night with minimal visibility. She transported soldiers with terrible injuries, men and women clinging to life in the cargo bay of her C-130. And she never lost a single patient during transport. Not one. Air Force doctors said, "Nightingale flies like she's carrying glass, not cargo." Other pilots called her the pilot who flies with angel hands. Her survival rate was 100% because her flying was so incredibly stable that medics could work on patients even while the aircraft was in the air. By the time she was 27, Jessica had completed 1,200 flight hours. She was qualified on multiple aircraft types. She was certified as an instructor pilot. She was on track for promotion to captain in the military. Everyone assumed she would have a long, distinguished military career. Then everything changed. 2 years ago, Jessica's closest friend and fellow C-130 pilot, Lieutenant Sarah Martinez, crashed during a routine night landing exercise. It wasn't pilot error. It was mechanical failure. The hydraulics had failed without warning. Sarah had done everything right, but the aircraft wouldn't respond. The result was catastrophic. Sarah survived the crash, but she was badly hurt. Severe burns covered 40% of her body. Her spine was damaged, leaving her paralyzed from the waist down. She would never walk again. Jessica visited Sarah in the hospital for months, watching her friend slowly decline despite the best medical care. The burns became infected. The paralysis was permanent. Sarah, who had been so full of life, who had loved flying more than anything, was trapped in a hospital bed in constant pain. Sarah's 4-year-old daughter, Emma, would visit too. Emma would climb onto the hospital bed carefully, avoiding the bandages and tubes, and ask the same question every time, "When is mommy coming home?" Sarah would smile through her pain and say, "Soon, baby. Soon." But they both knew it was a lie. Jessica watched Emma grow confused, then sad, then quietly resigned to her mother's absence. The light in the little girl's eyes dimmed with each visit. 6 months after the crash, Sarah died from complications. An infection that her weakened body couldn't fight. Jessica attended the funeral on a cold November morning. She wore her dress uniform, her medals heavy on her chest. She stood at attention as they folded the flag. And she watched little Emma clutch a teddy bear, the same teddy bear Sarah had given her on her 3rd birthday, and cry for her mommy. Something broke inside Jessica that day. Something fundamental shifted. She realized something that changed everything. "I've spent 8 years flying to save lives," she thought as she watched Emma sob. But who's saving the children who lose their parents? Who comforts them? Who holds them when they're scared and alone? Who tells them it's going to be okay, even when it's not? The military tried to keep her. Her commanding officer personally called her into his office. "Warner, you're one of the best pilots I've ever seen," he said. "You can't throw away your career. Think about what you're giving up." But Jessica had already made her decision. "I've been saving lives in the air for 8 years," she told him. "Now I need to save lives on the ground." Despite protests from her commanders, Jessica resigned her commission. She walked away from flying. She enrolled in an accelerated nursing program. She specialized in pediatric oncology, cancer in children. It was the hardest nursing specialty, but Jessica chose it deliberately. "These kids face death every day," she told herself. "They deserve someone who understands loss." For the past 18 months, Jessica had worked at Dallas Children's Hospital. She used her military discipline to comfort dying children. She brought stuffed animals from her own collection, animals she had collected during her deployments. She read to the children. She held their hands when their parents couldn't be there. She told them stories about brave pilots flying in the sky. She hadn't touched aircraft controls in 2 years. But she dreamed about flying every single night. Southwest Flight 2847 was supposed to be routine. Dallas to Seattle, nothing special. Jessica sat in seat 18C, trying to nap. She was carrying a letter of recommendation from Dallas Children's Hospital to Seattle Children's Hospital. She had been accepted for a position starting next month. Better salary. She needed it to pay off her nursing school student loans. The flight was smooth and boring for the first 2 hours. Over the intercom, Captain Preston made announcements in his usual condescending tone. "Folks, this is your captain. We'll be experiencing some light chop ahead. Nothing to worry about. We're professionals up here." Jessica rolled her eyes at his arrogance. "I've landed in sandstorms with wounded soldiers aboard," she thought. "This guy thinks turbulence is impressive." She tried to sleep, but her mind wouldn't stop. She kept seeing Sarah's daughter crying at the funeral. She kept thinking about Marcus, the 7-year-old boy with leukemia she had held while he died just last week. His last words haunted her, "Will there be planes in heaven? I want to fly." Jessica had promised him, "Yes, sweetie. You'll fly forever." Now she was carrying a stuffed airplane she had bought for Marcus. She planned to give it to another dying child in Seattle. She finally started to doze off. Then everything went wrong. 2 hours into the flight, Southwest 2847 was cruising at 33,000 feet over the Wyoming wilderness. The landscape below was rugged and beautiful, mountains, forests, and vast empty spaces where few people lived. Without warning, the aircraft encountered a large flock of Canada geese. The geese were migrating at an unusual altitude, but it happens sometimes. Climate change had altered migration patterns. Birds were flying higher and in unexpected places. The flock was massive, maybe 200 birds. The pilots had no warning. No time to react. No time to change course. The geese impacted both engines simultaneously. In an instant, everything changed. The effect was catastrophic. Both turbine blades were destroyed. The geese were sucked into the engines at 500 miles per hour. Metal blades shattered. Multiple compressor stages failed in both engines at the same time. It was a one-in-a-million event, the kind pilots train for, but pray never happens. Immediate dual flameout. Both engines quit. Massive banging sounds shook the aircraft like explosions. The plane shuddered violently, throwing passengers against their seatbelts. Overhead bins popped open. Bags fell. People screamed. Jessica jolted awake instantly. She knew that sound. She had heard turbine failures before during training exercises. But never both engines at once. Never like this. Her military training kicked in immediately. Her mind went from groggy to crystal clear in 1 second. Oxygen masks dropped from the ceiling, swinging wildly. All around her, passengers were panicking, grabbing for masks, screaming, crying, praying. Preston's voice came over the intercom, and for the first time, he sounded panicked. His professional pilot voice was gone. Now he just sounded scared. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've had a situation with our engines. We're working on it. Please remain calm and keep your seatbelts fastened." Jessica listened carefully to the engine sounds. Silence. Complete silence. No whine of turbines. No rush of air. Nothing. Both engines were dead. The aircraft was now gliding powerless from 33,000 feet. They had become a 75-ton glider with 178 people on board. Jessica's mind immediately started calculating. She couldn't help it. 8 years of military training kicked in automatically. Her brain became a computer, processing data, running scenarios, calculating probabilities. Altitude, 33,000 feet. Descent rate, the aircraft would start descending at approximately 1,800 feet per minute once it stabilized. Glide time, maybe 17 to 18 minutes before ground impact. Possibly 20 if they flew it perfectly. Nearest airport, Casper, Wyoming, 89 miles away. Glide ratio for a Boeing 737, approximately 17 to 1 in optimal conditions. The plane would travel about 17 miles forward for every mile of altitude lost. Maximum glide distance from this altitude, approximately 90 to 95 miles in perfect conditions. Could they make Casper? Possibly. But there was a headwind. Jessica could feel it in the way the aircraft was moving. That would reduce their range significantly. Maybe to 80 to 85 miles maximum. It would be close. Very close. Possibly impossible. Interstate 80 was somewhere below them, but she couldn't see it through the clouds. That might be a better option. A highway landing. Risky, but she had trained for it. Jessica unbuckled her seatbelt slightly, ready to move if needed. She listened to the cockpit communications over the cabin speakers. This was bad. Very bad. But she had been in bad situations before. And she had always found a way through. In the cockpit, Captain Preston and First Officer Chen were frantically running emergency restart checklists. They tried everything to relight the engines. Nothing worked. The engines were too damaged from the bird strike. Restart was impossible. "Captain, we've got nothing," Chen said, his voice tight with fear. "Both engines are gone. Turbine damage is too severe." Preston's voice was shaking. "Keep trying. There has to be something." "Sir, we're descending through 28,000 feet, Chen said urgently. "We need to declare an emergency and find a landing spot now." Preston made the Mayday call. "Mayday, Mayday," Southwest 2847. Dual engine failure. 178 souls on board. We are gliding, descending through 27,000 feet. Denver Center responded immediately. Southwest 2847, nearest suitable airport is Casper Regional, 92 miles from your current position. We won't make it, Preston said. Winds aloft are 40 knots headwind. Copy. Stand by for alternatives. Jessica sat in seat 18C, listening to everything through the cabin speakers. The cockpit communications were being broadcast so passengers could hear what was happening. She did mental calculations. It was automatic after years of training. Current altitude, 26,000 feet. Descent rate, approximately 1,800 feet per minute. Glide ratio for a Boeing 737, approximately 17:1. The plane would travel 17 miles forward for every 1 mile down. Total glide distance, maybe 80 to 85 miles maximum. Casper Airport was 92 miles away. They wouldn't make it. But Interstate 80 ran below them, roughly parallel to their flight path. If they could find a straight section of highway, they might be able to land there. Jessica had done highway landings in the C-130 during training. Similar principles, just a different aircraft. The problem was Captain Preston. He didn't sound confident. His voice was getting more panicked with each transmission. Chen sounded terrified too. They weren't thinking clearly. Panic does that to people. Someone needed to help them. Jessica unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up. The mother sitting across the aisle was crying with her 2 young daughters. "Where are you going?" the mother asked Jessica desperately. "Are we going to die?" Jessica knelt beside them. "I'm going to help the pilots. I promise we'll be okay. Hug your mom tight and think about your favorite place." She walked forward through the cabin. Passengers were sobbing and praying all around her. A man grabbed her arm. "You can't go up there. Sit down." Jessica looked him in the eye, her voice firm. "I'm a pilot. Let go." She continued forward. The flight attendant, Rita, was blocking the cockpit door. Rita had 25 years of experience and had seen everything. "Ma'am, you can't," Rita started. "I'm a pilot," Jessica interrupted. "Former Air National Guard. C-130S. 8 years. Those pilots need help. I can hear it in their voices." Rita looked skeptical. "You're a nurse." "I'm both," Jessica said. "Now let me through before we crash." Rita knocked on the cockpit door. Chen cracked it open. "Not now, we're busy." "There's a passenger who says she's a pilot," Rita said. "She wants to help." Preston yelled from the captain's seat. "We don't need civilian help. Tell her to sit down." Jessica pushed through the door. "Captain Preston," she said firmly, "I'm Jessica Warner. Former Air National Guard pilot. C-130 Hercules. 8 years active service. 1,200 hours. Call sign Nightingale. I can help." Preston turned around and recognized her immediately. "You're the nurse with the teddy bears," he said with disbelief. "Get out. This is no time for jokes." Jessica's voice turned ice cold. "I heard you mock me during boarding. You thought you were such a professional pilot. Right now, you sound panicked. Let me help." Chen interrupted. "Captain, we're through 20,000 feet. If she's really a pilot. She's a goddamn pediatric nurse." Preston shouted. "Who flew 47 medevac missions in combat?" Jessica shot back. "I landed on damaged runways under fire. Never lost a patient. Now either let me talk you through this, or watch us crash." Chen checked the altitude. "Captain, we're descending through 18,000 feet. We're running out of time." Preston was stubborn. His pride was getting in the way of logic. "I don't need help from Jessica grabbed the radio, cutting him off. Her voice was firm and professional. Denver Center, this is Jessica Warner. Former Air National Guard C-130 pilot, call sign Nightingale, currently aboard Southwest 2847. I'm taking an advisory role for this emergency landing. There was shocked silence on the frequency. Several seconds passed. Controllers at Denver Center were processing what they had just heard. Then a different voice came on. It was an older controller, his voice filled with recognition and disbelief. Nightingale? Is this actually Major Warner? From the 146th Airlift Wing? Jessica's heart skipped a beat. Someone recognized her call sign. After 2 years away from flying, someone still remembered. Affirmative, she said, her voice steady despite the emotion welling up inside her. But I'm a civilian now. And I need immediate terrain analysis for an emergency landing on Interstate 80. The controller's voice was filled with recognition and respect. There was also relief that someone capable was now involved. Nightingale, this is Colonel Matthews, retired. I coordinated your medevac missions in Afghanistan back in 2019 and 2020. I heard you left the service. Never understood why someone with your skills would walk away. It's good to hear your voice, even under these circumstances. Stand by, I'm pulling up I-80 terrain now. Colonel Matthews began typing furiously at his workstation. Other controllers gathered around him. Word was spreading through Denver Center, Nightingale was back. Nightingale, I've got your position, Matthews continued. You're currently over the Medicine-bound National Forest. Interstate 80 is approximately 12 miles south-southwest of your position. I'm scanning for the best landing section now. In the cockpit, Preston and Chen were both staring at Jessica with new eyes. The arrogant mockery from earlier had completely evaporated. Preston looked pale. Chen looked hopeful for the first time since the engines had failed. You really are military, Preston said quietly, almost to himself. Chen was studying the instruments, then looked at Jessica. Ma'am, if Denver Center recognizes your call sign and they're taking your lead, then you better start listening to everything I say, Jessica finished his sentence. Because right now, I'm the only person on this aircraft who's done what we're about to attempt. Preston was staring at Jessica in shock. You're really military. Chen looked at her with new respect. Sir, if Denver recognizes her call sign. Jessica ignored them. She was scanning the instruments. You're descending too fast, she said to Chen. Pitch up 3 degrees. Maximize glide distance. Preston's hands were frozen on the controls. Chen reached over and adjusted the pitch. 3 degrees up. Captain, she's right. This is extending our range. Current altitude? Jessica asked. 16,000, Chen replied. Distance to I-80 below us? Chen checked the navigation display. Approximately 12 miles. Jessica did rapid mental math. We'll make it with maybe 1,000 feet to spare. But you need to find a straight section of highway. Traffic needs to be cleared. Preston finally broke. His arrogance crumbled. I don't know how to land on a highway, he admitted. All my training is on runways. Jessica looked at him calmly. Then let me talk you through it. I've done this. Trust me. Colonel Matthews from Denver Center came back on the radio. Jessica could hear the rapid clicking of computer keys in the background. Other controllers were helping him, pulling up maps and terrain data. Nightingale, I have I-80 mapped. Best option is the section between mile markers 187 and 194. 7 miles straight. Relatively flat. Light traffic at this time of day. Wyoming Highway Patrol is being notified now to clear traffic. State police are responding with multiple units. Perfect, Jessica said, relief flooding through her. Give me GPS coordinates. Matthews read them off carefully, twice to make sure she had them correct. Jessica plotted the approach in her mind. Years of navigation training made this automatic. "Captain Preston," she said, her voice commanding now, "new heading, 275 degrees. That puts us on the approach path for the highway." Preston's hands were shaking on the controls. His confidence had completely evaporated. The arrogant Navy pilot from the boarding gate was gone. Now he was just a scared man facing a situation he had never trained for. "I'll fly it, Captain," Chen said, his voice steady. He was taking control. Chen was younger than Preston, but right now he was steadier. Sometimes youth meant less fear, less understanding of just how dangerous this was. "Good," Jessica said with approval. "Chen flies. Preston, you work the checklists. I'll coordinate everything. We work as a team now. No egos. No pride. Just get everyone down alive." Preston looked defeated, his face pale. "I'm sorry I mocked you earlier. I'm so sorry I didn't take you seriously. If we get through this." Apologies later, Jessica interrupted firmly but kindly. "Flying now. Every second counts." She turned her attention back to the approach. "Checklist for landing without engines," she said. "First question, landing gear up or down?" Chen thought for a moment, running through his training. "I think, down. We always land with gear down." "Wrong," Jessica said firmly. "Gear stays up. Highway pavement can't take the force of landing gear designed for reinforced runways. The gear will catch on the pavement, dig in, and flip us end over end. We'll cartwheel and break apart. Everyone dies." Preston's eyes went wide. "But belly landing will destroy the aircraft." "The insurance." "The aircraft is insured," Jessica replied, her voice sharp. "It's a machine. It can be replaced. Passengers aren't. They have families, children, futures. The aircraft is expendable. They are not. Gear stays up. Non-negotiable." Preston swallowed hard and nodded. "Gear up." Jessica continued running through the mental checklist. "Flaps, we'll use them for lift control but minimum drag. Speed, we need to maintain 160 knots on approach, then slow to 140 for landing. Any slower and we stall. Any faster and we won't be able to stop on the highway." She turned to Preston. "Captain, I need you to calculate our stopping distance. Belly landing, no thrust reversers, no wheel brakes. Only friction and that slight uphill grade Matthews mentioned. Can we stop in 7 miles? Preston pulled out his flight computer, his hands still shaking but his mind focusing on the problem. This was something he could calculate. Something familiar. Running the numbers, aircraft weight, friction coefficient for belly on asphalt, uphill grade of 1.5%, yes. Yes, we should stop in approximately 6,000 to 6,500 feet. That's just over a mile. We'll have room. Good, Jessica said. That's what I calculated too. We've got this. They descended through 12,000 feet. Jessica coached Chen step by step. Flaps to 5 degrees, she said. It gives us lift without too much drag. Chen complied. Jessica watched the airspeed indicator. Speed's good. 160 knots. Hold that. Preston was running through landing checklist items with shaking hands. Passengers need the brace position announcement now, Jessica said. Preston keyed the PA system. Ladies and gentlemen, we are making an emergency landing on the highway below. Everyone assume brace position. This is going to be rough, but you will survive. Jessica thought to herself, better announcement than before. He's learning. At 8,000 feet, Jessica spotted Interstate 80 through the clouds. Visual on the highway. 12 o'clock, she called out. I see it, Chen said. Adjust heading 2 degrees right, Jessica instructed. Line up perfectly. No margin for error. Chen made the correction. 2 degrees right. Descending through 6,000 feet, Jessica explained every decision. Chen, the highway is narrow compared to a runway. Your natural instinct will be to flare high. Don't. Flare low and hard. Get the aircraft on the pavement fast. We can't afford to float. Flare low, Chen repeated. Got it. When we touch down, you'll feel scraping sounds. That's the belly. Don't panic. Keep the wings level. Use the rudder to stay straight. Preston asked, what about thrust reversers? No engines means no reversers, Jessica explained. We stop using friction and brakes. This highway has an upgrade slope ahead. That'll help with deceleration. Chen's voice was nervous. I've never landed without engines. Neither have I on a 737, Jessica admitted. But physics are physics. Trust your training and my guidance. I'll talk you through every foot. At 3,000 feet, passengers could see the highway below. Police cars with flashing lights were blocking traffic. News helicopters were already filming the scene. Altitude 3,000, Jessica called out. Speed 150. Perfect. Extend flaps to 15 degrees. Chen complied. The aircraft was now in full landing configuration, except the gear was up. At 2,000 feet, Jessica continued. Chen, you're doing great. Keep the descent rate steady. 1,000 feet per minute. Chen's voice was shaking. I can see cars clearing the highway. Don't look at the cars, Jessica said. Eyes on the aim point. Mile marker 190. Focus on that. At 1,000 feet, Jessica saw a problem. There was a semi-truck still on the highway that hadn't moved. Highway patrol, she called on the radio, you've got a vehicle at mile marker 189. Needs clearing now. The police radio crackled. Copy, moving it. The truck pulled off the highway with seconds to spare. At 500 feet, Jessica's voice became like a metronome. Steady. Calm, precise, this was what she had been trained for. This was what 8 years of military flying had prepared her for. Altitude 500. Speed 140. Perfect. Hold it. Chen's hands were sweating on the controls. He could see the highway clearly now. It looked impossibly narrow. Cars had been cleared, but he could see the police vehicles on the shoulders, their lights flashing. News helicopters hovered at a safe distance. At 300 feet, altitude 300. Start your flare. Gently. Raise the nose 5 degrees. Chen pulled back on the yoke. The nose rose gradually. Jessica watched the instruments and the approaching highway with equal attention. Good. Hold that pitch. Don't let it drop. At 200 feet, the ground was rushing up at them. Passengers who had their eyes open could see individual cars on the side of the highway. They could see people standing and watching. They could see the long stretch of empty pavement waiting for them. Altitude 200, Jessica called out. You're doing great, Chen. Stay focused. At 100 feet, hold that attitude. Let it settle. Don't force it. The aircraft will tell you when it's ready. Preston was gripping his armrests so hard his knuckles were white. He was watching Chen fly, watching Jessica guide him, and realizing with absolute clarity that he could never have done this. His 22 years of experience meant nothing right now. This woman, this nurse he had mocked, was saving all their lives. At 50 feet, the aircraft was dropping toward the highway. Chen could see the texture of the pavement. He could see the painted lane lines. At 20 feet, steady. Steady. Don't rush it. At 10 feet, Jessica's voice remained calm. Now, full flare. Nose up. Chen yanked the yoke back with everything he had. The nose lifted dramatically. The tail struck the pavement first with a tremendous scraping sound, metal on concrete, sparks flying in every direction. Then the belly hit with a massive grinding noise that sounded like the end of the world. Sparks flew everywhere. The sound was deafening, a continuous roar of metal scraping on pavement at 100 miles per hour. Passengers screamed. Some prayed. Some held each other. Some closed their eyes and waited for death. The aircraft was sliding down Interstate 80, belly first, like a massive toboggan. Wings level, Chen. Jessica shouted over the noise. Rudder control. Keep it straight. Chen was fighting the controls with everything he had. The aircraft wanted to veer left, the belly wasn't flat, it was creating uneven friction. Chen used the rudder to compensate, keeping the aircraft centered on the highway. Jessica was calling out continuously. Center line. You're drifting right, 2 degrees left rudder. Good. Hold it. You're doing it. All 178 passengers were holding each other, screaming and praying. Mothers covered their children's ears. Strangers held hands. Everyone was certain they were about to die. The aircraft was decelerating from friction and the slight uphill grade of the highway. Jessica watched the speed. 80 knots. 60 knots. 40. Chen's hands were white-knuckled on the controls, keeping the wings level. At 30 knots, Jessica said, "You've got it." 20 knots, almost stopped. The aircraft finally slid to a halt. They had traveled 6,200 feet down the highway, just over a mile. The tail was damaged. The belly was completely scraped away. But the wings were intact. The fuselage was intact. Everyone was alive. There was complete silence for 3 seconds. Then the cabin erupted. Crying, praying, screaming in relief. Jessica spoke calmly. "Chen, nice landing, Preston, evacuation procedures." Preston was staring at her in absolute awe. "You just saved 178 lives." "We saved them," Jessica corrected him. "Now evacuate before something catches fire." Emergency slides deployed from the aircraft doors with loud hissing sounds. Passengers began evacuating onto Interstate 80, sliding down to safety. Wyoming Highway Patrol and emergency vehicles surrounded the aircraft. Paramedics were checking everyone, working quickly and efficiently. Fire trucks stood ready in case of fire, but miraculously, there was no fire. The fuel tanks had held. Miraculously, there were only minor injuries. Bumps, bruises. 1 broken arm from an overhead bin that had come open during the landing. A few people had whiplash. Several had panic attacks. But everyone was alive. Flight attendant Rita was helping passengers down the slides, counting heads, making sure everyone got out safely. She had been through emergency training dozens of times, but this was her first real evacuation. Her hands were shaking, but she kept her voice calm. "One at a time. Hold the handrails. Slide down on your bottom. Move away from the aircraft once you're down." Jessica was the last to evacuate. She had stayed in the cockpit until every passenger was off, watching the evacuation through the cockpit windows, making sure the process was going smoothly. As she finally made her way to the emergency slide and came down, passengers started recognizing her. "That's the nurse. She saved us. She's the pilot." She walked into the cockpit. She talked them through the landing. The mother with 2 daughters, the same woman Jessica had comforted during the crisis, ran forward with her girls. All 3 of them were crying with relief and gratitude. They threw their arms around Jessica in a desperate hug. "Thank you. Thank you. You saved my babies," the mother sobbed into Jessica's shoulder. Jessica was crying now too. The adrenaline was wearing off. The reality of what had just happened was sinking in. She had saved 178 lives. Every single person on this aircraft was alive because of the skills she had learned in the military, the skills she had walked away from 2 years ago. "I'm just glad you're all okay," Jessica said, hugging them back. "I'm so glad you're okay." Other passengers came up to her. A businessman shook her hand vigorously, tears streaming down his face. An elderly couple blessed her. A teenager asked for her autograph. Preston and Chin approached, walking slowly across the highway. Preston's face showed both profound shame and immense gratitude. His uniform was disheveled. His perfect hair was messed up. His arrogance had been completely stripped away. "Jessica," he said, his voice breaking, "I owe you the biggest apology of my life. I mocked you. I judged you by your appearance. I thought I knew what a pilot looked like. I thought I knew what competence looked like." He paused, struggling with his emotions. "You're 10 times the pilot I am. Maybe 100 times. I've been flying for 22 years, and I've never seen anything like what you just did." Jessica looked at him kindly. There was no anger in her eyes. No desire for revenge or vindication. Just compassion. "You're a good pilot, Captain," she said. "You just panicked. It happens to everyone. The important thing, the only thing that matters, is that everyone lived." Chen stepped forward. He was younger than Preston, less burdened by ego. "Ma'am, I just want to say. I'll never forget this. You taught me more in 20 minutes than I learned in 6 years of commercial flying." Jessica smiled at him. "You did great, Chen. You kept your head when it mattered. That landing was yours as much as mine." News helicopters had captured the entire landing on live television. Every major network had broken into regular programming with "breaking news" banners. The footage was stunning and terrifying. A commercial airliner belly landing on a highway, sparks flying for over a mile, sliding to a perfect stop. News anchors were calling it a miracle. Aviation experts were calling it impossible. Jessica's face was suddenly everywhere. Social media exploded. Within an hour, she was trending worldwide. Nurse pilot saves flight. Hero in pink scrubs. Nightingale lands again. The pilot they mocked becomes the pilot who saved them. Video of the landing had been viewed 50 million times in the first 2 hours. Passengers were posting their own videos from inside the cabin, the terrifying moments, the screaming, then the miraculous survival. Reporters were swarming the scene now. Satellite trucks, camera crews, journalists from every major outlet. They all wanted to talk to the nurse pilot who had saved 178 lives. Jessica stood near the aircraft, still in her cartoon unicorn scrubs, looking exhausted and overwhelmed. Reporters were shouting questions at her. "Ms. Warner. How did you stay so calm? Jessica. Were you scared? What was going through your mind? How does it feel to be a hero?" Jessica kept saying the same thing, her voice quiet and humble, "I did what I was trained to do. Any pilot would have done the same. I'm just grateful everyone survived." But Preston had had enough of her modesty. He pushed through the crowd of reporters, his uniform dirty and disheveled, and interrupted. "No," he said firmly, his voice carrying authority. "Any pilot wouldn't have. Stop saying that." The reporters turned to him, cameras swinging in his direction. Preston continued, his voice emotional but clear. "I'm a 22-year veteran with thousands of hours of flight time. I'm ex-Navy. I've landed on carrier decks. I thought I was experienced. I thought I knew what I was doing." He paused, struggling with his emotions. "But up there, at 33,000 feet with both engines gone, I was freezing. I was panicking. I didn't know what to do. And this woman," he gestured to Jessica, "this woman I mocked during boarding, this woman I laughed at for carrying teddy bears, she walked into that cockpit and took control like she'd done it 1,000 times. His voice broke. She saved my life. She saved my first officer's life. She saved 176 passengers. And she did it with more skill and grace than I've seen in my entire career. She's not just a hero. She's the finest pilot I've ever known. Chen stepped forward too, standing next to Preston. I flew the landing, but she talked me through every second. Every decision, every adjustment. Without Nightingale, we'd be a crater in the Wyoming wilderness right now. A reporter shouted, "Nightingale? What's that?" Her military call sign, Chen explained, his voice full of respect. Major Jessica Warner. Air National Guard legend. 8 years of service. 47 medevac missions. 100% survival rate. She earned that call sign flying wounded soldiers out of combat zones. Look her up. The reporters started typing frantically on their phones. Within minutes, they had found her military records. The questions started coming faster. Major Warner, why did you leave the military? Is it true you never lost a patient? How many emergency landings have you done? Why did you become a nurse? Jessica held up her hands, overwhelmed. Please. Please. I'm not comfortable with all this attention. I'm just glad everyone is safe. That's all that matters. But the story was already beyond her control. It was spreading worldwide. The nurse pilot who saved 178 lives. The hero in cartoon scrubs. Nightingale had landed again. Within hours, Jessica's military records became public. Major Jessica Warner. 146th Airlift Wing, Air National Guard. 8 years of service. 1,200 flight hours. 47 medevac missions. 100% patient survival rate. Call sign, Nightingale, for her gentle flying technique. Decorated for valor, including the Distinguished Flying Cross. Voluntarily resigned her commission in 2022 to pursue a nursing career. Journalists called her the pilot who chose children over career and the nurse who saved 178 lives. Preston's quote to the media was played on every news channel, "I mocked a nurse carrying teddy bears. I didn't know she was a legendary medevac pilot. My arrogance almost cost lives. She's the most humble hero I've ever met." That evening, Jessica was in a hotel room provided by the airline. She was exhausted. Her phone rang. It was the chief of nursing from Seattle Children's Hospital. "Ms. Warner, we saw the news. We understand if you're not ready to start next month given the trauma you've been through." Jessica interrupted. "I'll be there on time. Those kids need me." "About that," the chief said, "we'd like to revise your offer. Would you be interested in a flight nurse position? We have a medical transport helicopter. It needs a pilot nurse for critical transfers. We thought you might." Jessica's heart skipped a beat. "You're offering me a flight nurse position? I can fly again and care for children." "Exactly," the chief said. "Use both your skills. What do you say?" Jessica was crying happy tears. "Yes. Absolutely yes. That's perfect." 2 weeks later, Jessica visited Sarah Martinez's grave. She placed flowers on the headstone and talked to her friend. "Sarah, I flew again. I saved 178 people, including 12 children. I used everything you taught me about smooth flying. I think about you every day." She paused, tears running down her face. "I'm taking a job as a flight nurse in Seattle. Flying sick kids to hospitals. I'll keep our promise to take care of the little ones. I know you're proud." Sarah's daughter Emma, now 6 years old, approached with her grandmother. "Are you Aunt Jessica?" Emma asked. "Grandma said you're famous now." Jessica hugged Emma tightly. "I'm not famous, sweetie. I just did what your mommy would have done. Mommy said you were the best pilot ever, Emma said. Jessica smiled through her tears. Your mommy was the best. I'm still learning from her. Jessica's first day at Seattle Children's Hospital arrived. She wore a new flight suit instead of scrubs. She toured the medical helicopter, an EC-135. She met the flight crew. The pilot, Tom, was ex-Army with 15 years of experience. He was initially skeptical. So you're the nurse pilot from the news, he said. Think you can handle medevac? Jessica smiled. I flew 47 combat medevacs. I can handle this. The first call came quickly. A 3-year-old boy was having a cardiac emergency at a rural hospital 90 miles away. He needed immediate transport to Seattle for surgery. Jessica and the team scrambled. They took off in the helicopter. Jessica piloted while a nurse in the back prepared equipment. The flight was smooth as glass, despite turbulence. How are you flying so smooth? The nurse asked. Jessica smiled. They don't call me Nightingale for nothing. Patients need gentle hands. 6 months later, Jessica was flying a routine medevac mission. She was transporting an 8-year-old girl named Sophie who had leukemia. Sophie was being flown from Spokane to Seattle for treatment. Sophie was scared and crying. Jessica spoke over the intercom from the pilot's seat. Sophie, you know what? I'm a pilot and a nurse. I flew big cargo planes in the Air Force. Want to hear stories? Sophie's crying slowed. Really? You're a pilot? Yep, Jessica said. They called me Nightingale because I fly as gentle as birds. Close your eyes and feel how smooth this ride is. Sophie calmed down, listening to Jessica's stories during the hour-long flight. When they landed, Sophie's mom was crying with gratitude. Thank you for making her feel safe. Jessica smiled. That's what Nightingales do. We carry precious cargo very gently. 1 year after the Southwest emergency landing, there was a ceremony on Interstate 80 at mile marker 190 in Wyoming. A permanent plaque was installed. On this site, Major Jessica Warner, call sign Nightingale, landed Southwest Flight 2847, saving 178 lives through extraordinary skill and courage. All 178 passengers were invited. Most of them attended. Jessica was uncomfortable with all the attention, but she was grateful to see the survivors alive and well. Preston and Chen were both present. Preston gave a speech. 1 year ago, I mocked a young woman for carrying stuffed animals and wearing cartoon scrubs. I didn't realize she was the hero I would depend on to save my life and 176 passengers. He paused, his voice emotional. I learned humility that day. Never judge people by appearances. This woman is the finest pilot I've known, and I'm honored she tolerates me. The story ends in the pediatric oncology ward at Seattle Children's Hospital on a quiet Tuesday evening. Jessica still works there part-time when she's not flying medevac missions. She splits her time now, 3 days a week in the hospital, 4 days flying the medical helicopter. It's the perfect balance. She gets to use both her skills. Both her callings. Tonight, she's sitting with a 5-year-old boy named Lucas. He has terminal brain cancer, glioblastoma, the worst kind. The doctors have done everything they can. Chemotherapy, radiation, surgery, but the cancer keeps growing. Lucas has maybe 2 months left. Maybe 3 if they're lucky. But Lucas doesn't know that. All he knows is that he's tired a lot, and his head hurts, and a nice nurse named Jessica comes to read him stories. Jessica is reading him a book about brave pilots. Lucas's favorite book. They've read it together a dozen times now. Lucas has it memorized, but he never gets tired of it. I want to be a pilot when I grow up, Lucas says, his small voice full of wonder and hope. Jessica feels her heart break into 1,000 pieces. She fights back tears. She's gotten good at hiding her tears from the children. They don't need to see her cry. Then you will be, she says softly, smiling at him. And you'll be a great pilot. The best pilot in the whole sky. Will you teach me? Lucas asks, his big brown eyes looking up at her with absolute trust. Jessica takes his small hand in hers. His hand is so tiny. So fragile. I promise, she says, her voice thick with emotion. I'll teach you everything about flying. All my secrets. Everything I know. She knows he won't survive to fulfill that dream. She knows that in 2 months, maybe 3, she'll be attending another funeral. She'll be watching another family grieve. She'll be adding another name to the long list of children she couldn't save. But right now, in this moment, she gives him hope. Because hope is sometimes all we have. Hope is what keeps us going when everything else is dark. Lucas smiles and closes his eyes, still holding her hand. Within minutes, he's asleep. Jessica sits with him for a while longer, just watching him breathe. Just being present. Sometimes that's all a nurse can do. Sometimes presence is the greatest gift. Later that night, Jessica is in the medical helicopter, flying an emergency transport. A teenage girl with a severe asthma attack needs to get from a rural hospital to Seattle's ICU. Time is critical. Jessica pilots the helicopter through the darkness, her hands steady on the controls. Below her, the lights of Seattle glitter like stars. Above her, the real stars shine in the clear night sky. As she flies, tears run down her face. She thinks about Lucas. She thinks about Marcus, who died last year. She thinks about all the children she's held while they took their last breaths. She thinks about Sarah Martinez and little Emma. She whispers to herself, her voice barely audible over the helicopter's engines. I fly for them. For the ones who can't anymore, for Marcus and Lucas and Emma and all of them. Nightingale doesn't retire. She just finds new ways to use gentle hands. Whether landing aircraft with no engines or holding dying children while they dream of flying. Same mission, same heart. Same call sign. She wipes her tears with the back of her hand and focuses on flying. The teenage girl in the back needs her to be steady. Needs her to fly like she's carrying glass. Because that's what Nightingale does. She flies with angel hands, no matter what she's carrying. No matter how heavy the weight of grief and loss. No matter how many funerals she's attended or how many children she couldn't save. She keeps flying. Because someone has to. Because these children, these patients, these precious cargo, they deserve someone who cares enough to fly them gently. To give them smooth rides. To make them feel safe even when they're scared. That's what the call sign means. That's what Nightingale has always meant. Not just a name. Not just a title. A promise. A promise to care for the vulnerable. To use strength gently. To bring hope in dark moments. To save lives with whatever skills you have, whether in a cockpit at 33,000 feet or in a hospital room holding a dying child's hand. As Jessica lands the helicopter at Seattle Children's Hospital, the teenage girl is stabilized and rushed to the ICU. She'll survive. She'll go home to her family. She'll graduate high school and maybe go to college. Another life saved. Jessica walks back to the helicopter, ready for the next call. Ready to fly again, ready to use her gentle hands for whatever comes next. Because Nightingale never really landed. She just keeps flying, in one way or another, carrying precious cargo, saving lives with grace and skill and an unbreakable determination to make a difference. And sometimes, just sometimes, the nurse in cartoon scrubs turns out to be the hero everyone needed. They just had to look past the teddy bears to see it. This story proves that call signs aren't earned by looking tough in flight suits. They're earned by having hands gentle enough to comfort dying children, yet strong enough to land aircraft with no engines. Nurses carrying teddy bears might be legendary pilots. Mockery reveals the mocker's ignorance, not the mocked person's inadequacy. Nightingale means bringing healing and hope, whether in a hospital ward or in a cockpit 33,000 feet up. Some people are built to save lives in any situation, using whatever skills they have. The pilots who mocked Jessica learned what the passengers discovered: when engines fail and death is certain, you don't want the arrogant captain who looks impressive. You want the humble nurse in cartoon scrubs who's landed aircraft in conditions that would terrify most pilots. Because Nightingale flies with angel hands. And sometimes angels wear pink unicorn scrubs, not flight suits. Jessica Warner continues flying medical helicopters for Seattle Children's Hospital. She's transported over 500 critically ill children. Her survival rate remains 100%. Captain Mike Preston retired from commercial aviation and now teaches at a flight school. He tells every student about the day a nurse saved his life. He's a different man, humble, kind, forever changed. First Officer Jake Chen was promoted to captain. He flies with Jessica's lessons in his heart every single day. The mother with daughters Sarah and Emma moved to Seattle. The girls visit Aunt Jessica every month. They both want to be pilots when they grow up. Lucas passed away peacefully 6 weeks after Jessica's last visit. At his funeral, his parents gave Jessica a letter he had written. It said, "Dear Jessica, thank you for teaching me to fly. I'm flying now. Higher than any plane. Love, Lucas." Jessica keeps that letter in her flight suit pocket. Every single flight. Little Emma Martinez, Sarah's daughter, just turned 9. She tells everyone her mom was best friends with a hero named Nightingale. She's right. The Boeing 737 from Flight 2847 was declared a total loss, but its damaged belly section was preserved. It's now on display at the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C., with a plaque telling Jessica's story. Every year on the anniversary of the landing, all 178 survivors gather on Interstate 80, at mile marker 190. They bring their families. Their children, their grandchildren. They tell the story of Nightingale, the nurse who saved them all. And somewhere in Seattle, Jessica Warner wakes up each morning, puts on either her nurse scrubs or her flight suit, and goes to save lives. Because that's what Nightingale does. She saves lives with gentle hands and a brave heart. Forever.